Hi, welcome to Danny After Dark. If you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a notification or a new episode. Tonight, I'll be featuring the case of Michael Swango. Let's go ahead and find out more. Let's go ahead and dive on in. Joseph Michael Swango was born October 21st, 1954. Michael was raised in Quincy, Illinois. He rated as a genius in high school, scoring 160 on an IQ test. So it's not surprising Michael graduated first in his class and was named High School Student of the Year in 1972. He was also a member of the Quincy Notre Dame Band when he played clarinet. Michael then went on to serve in the Marine Corps and received an honorable discharge in 1980. He then went on to attend Quincy College, now known as Quincy University, and later went to the Southern Illinois University School of Medicine, also known as SIU. This is where Michael's troubles began to first be noticed at SIU. He was known as lazy. He preferred to work as an ambulance attendant as opposed to focusing on his schoolwork. His fellow students noticed he had a noticeable fascination with dying patients. However, no one noticed at the time, but many patients that Michael was assigned to do basic checkups ended up coding. Coding is known as when they suffer life-threatening emergencies. At least 5 of his patients ended up dying. While Michael's lack of studying caught up with him only 1 month before he was due to graduate, he was caught faking checkups during his scheduled rotations. So this held him back from graduating. However, the school was compassionate and let him graduate a year after the rest of his class. But it was on the condition that he repeat that rotation and complete several assignments in other specialties. Now, Michael got a surgical internship at the Ohio State University Medical Center in 1983. To follow was a residency in neurosurgery. So he began his work at the Rhodes Hall Wing, and nurses began to notice that healthy patients began dying at a mysteriously alarming frequency. They also noticed at the times Michael had been the intern on the floor. On one occasion specifically, the nurse caught Michael injecting medicine, quote unquote, into a patient who later became strangely ill. Well, the nurses reported their concerns to the administrators, but they were accused of being paranoid. So Michael was cleared of an investigation in 1984. Now, July 1984, Michael began working as an emergency medical technician in Quincy with the Adams County Ambulance Corps. What happened? Well, soon many of the paramedics on his staff began to notice that anytime Michael prepared their coffee or brought in food, several of them would become sick, but violently sick. So they decided to do a little bit of investigating. What they noticed was every time Michael came for his shift, he would bring a duffel bag. So when he left on a call, the coworkers that stayed behind went into his locker and retrieved the duffel bag. Inside, they found a box of taro ant poison. Well, this is just odd to bring to work. So his coworkers decided to set a trap. The men purposely left a freshly brewed pot of iced tea on the counter when they knew Michael would then be alone. So they went out on a call. When they returned, Michael had then gone out, so the coworkers poured out that tea into another container and washed out the pot. They brought that poured out liquid to the local coroner, and the local coroner sent it to the nearest FBI lab for testing. Seems a little paranoid, right? Well, not really. The results indicated traces of toxin. October 1984. Because of this incident, Michael was arrested by the Quincy Police Department, and they found arsenic and other poisons in his possession. October 23rd, 1985. Due to that same incident, Michael was convicted of aggravated battery for poisoning his coworkers. He was then sentenced to 5 years in jail. 1989, Michael, after serving his time, was released from prison. He went on to find work as a counselor at the State Career Development Center in Newport News, Virginia. But this didn't last very long. He was let go after being caught working on a scrapbook of disasters on company work time. Now, Michael went on to find a new job as a laboratory technician for ATI Coal in Newport News, Virginia. While he worked there, several employees would get unexplainably sick with persistent and increasing pains. Well, he was employed there until 1991, when he resigned because he was seeking out a new position as a doctor, but didn't have the qualifications to do so. So how'd that happen? Well, around this time, Michael met Kristen Kenny, who was a nurse at Riverside Hospital. They started dating and planned to marry once they got settled. In 1991, Michael legally changed his name to Daniel J. Adams, and he tried to apply for a residency program at the Ohio Valley Medical Center in Wheeling, West Virginia. July 1992. He also began working at the Sanford USD Medical Center in Sioux Falls. In both of these cases, Michael forged several legal documents that he used to reestablish himself as a physician and a respected member of society. This included falsifying his previous criminal record. October 1992. Michael attempted to join the American Medical Association, also known as the AMA. However, the AMA does an extremely thorough background check on all applicants, and they found his previous career, including his poisoning conviction. That Thanksgiving Day, the Discovery Channel aired an episode called Justice Files, and that show had a segment on who? None other than Michael Swango. Well, Michael's employers found out, and he was immediately fired from Stanford. Kristen, upon finding this out, broke up with Michael and moved back to Virginia. At the time they were together, she had been suffering from violent migraines. However, when she moved out of Michael's, the headaches suddenly stopped. Michael now found a new job in the psychiatric residency program at the State University of New York at Stony Brook School of Medicine. His first rotation was in the internal medicine department at the VA Medical Center in Northport, New York. While there, Michael's patients began dying for no reason and at an alarming rate. 4 months later, Michael found out that Kristen committed suicide. Her mother, Sharon Cooper, got in touch with a friend of Kristen's, who was a nurse at Stanford. Well, under intense questioning from the head of Stony Brook Psychiatric Department, Michael ended up having to admit that he lied about his poisoning conviction in Illinois, and he was immediately fired. Since this incident took place at a VA facility, not just state employees were now involved, federal authorities became involved. So up until mid-1994, the FBI was able to find out that Michael was now living in Atlanta, He found a job working as a chemist at a computer equipment company's wasteland facility. Well, the FBI contacted his company, and Michael was fired for lying on his job application. The FBI also obtained a warrant, and they charged Michael with using fraudulent credentials to gain entry into a VA hospital. Well, Michael was not going to surrender, so he fled and he left the country. November 1994, Michael went to Zimbabwe and got a job. Where? You guessed it, at a hospital. He was able to get this job based on forging documents. Well, at this hospital, his patients began to die mysteriously and at an alarming rate. However, it took a year for these deaths and poisonings to be traced to him. So he was then arrested in Zimbabwe. Well, he was charged, but got a prominent lawyer named David Coulthard and was able to escape Zimbabwe before his trial. So he went and hid in Zambia. Well, a year and a half later, March 1997, he went on to apply at a job in Saudi Arabia using a false resume. But all this was happening while the VA criminal investigator consulted with a forensic psychiatrist to better help them with the case. Because of the considerable clinical expertise, they were able to review documents and evidence and give a psychological profile of Dr. Michael Swango, along with why he committed such horrendous crimes in the first place. This and other evidence was enough for the Immigration and Naturalization Service agents to arrest Michael. June 1997, Michael was stopped when he tried coming back to the US. He was at a stopover at the Chicago O'Hare International Airport on his way back to Saudi Arabia. Now, Michael was faced with very hard evidence of his crimes and pleaded guilty to defrauding the government in March 1998. So, in that same time, he was sentenced, but to only 3.5 years in prison. But this was enough time that the government was able to look into his past crimes. Part of that investigation, prosecutors were able to exhume the bodies of 3 of his former patients who mysteriously died. And in all 3 of those patients, they found poisoning chemicals in them. July 11th, 2000, less than a week before Michael was due to be released from prison on the fraud charge, federal prosecutors filed a criminal complaint charging Michael with 3 counts of murder, 1 count of assault, and 1 count each of false statements, mail fraud, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. At the same time, the Zimbabwe authorities charged him with poisoning 7 patients, 5 of them who ended up dying. Michael was formally indicted on July 17, 2000, and he pled not guilty. September 6, 2000, he ended up pleading guilty to murder and fraud charges. But why? Why did he so easily change his plea? He had done so to avoid the possibility of the death penalty. At his sentencing hearing, prosecutors read passages from Michael's notebooks. In those notebooks, he described the joy he felt during all of his crimes. He loved the, quote, sweet, husky, close smell of indoor homicide, end quote. He claimed that these murders were, quote, the only way I have of reminding myself that I'm still alive, end quote. Michael was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms. However, it is estimated that Michael Swango is responsible for the deaths of between 30 and 60 patients. That is the case of Dr. Michael Swango. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Danny After Dark. Do you have a question or comment on the case? Leave it down below. Let's be interactive. Do you have a suggestion for a case that you'd like me to cover? Well, leave it in the comments, and you may see it featured in an upcoming episode. Until next time, remember, we don't live in darkness. Darkness lives in us.